Good morning, dear students. Today I will talk about the next viral disease and the last viral disease, that is HIV. So these are the contents that I would be talking about in today's lecture. AIDS. What is this AIDS? Many of you would be aware. AIDS refers to acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This AIDS is basically a disorder of the cell-mediated immune response of the body. What exactly is the cell-mediated immune response? You would have studied in immunology part. So the cell-mediated immune response is considered to have evolved in a simpler form to say it is the way of the body to recognize self from non-self. In case of humoral mediated immunity, antibodies are responsible for killing the extracellular pathogens that enter the body, whereas in case of cell mediated immunity, the intracellular pathogens like viruses that enter into the cell are targeted basically by the cell mediated immune response of the host. So this is about cell mediated immune response. So in AIDS, what happens is there is reduction in the number of helper T cells, which stimulates antibody production by the B cells. These helper T cells are the ones that are responsible for stimulating antibody production as well. So the helper T cell itself is targeted so that they cannot directly target the viruses, and also the immunity is further reduced. The humoral immunity is also further reduced by blocking the antibody production by B cells. So this results in loss of natural defense against the viral infection. So what is the causative organism that is responsible for this disease? It is HIV. HIV refers to human immunodeficiency virus. So coming to a brief discovery of when AIDS was actually discovered and when the history started off with AIDS is in the year 1981. That was when it was first noticed in USA amongst the homosexuals. Then after 2 years, the virus was discovered by Professor Luc Montagnier and his colleagues at the Institute of Pasteur. In India, the first infection of AIDS was detected in Tamil Nadu, in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, in prostitutes. And the AIDS was officially named as, the virus was officially named as human immunodeficiency virus by the International Committee of Viral Nomenclature in the same year, that is 1986. And after almost 2 decades, the discovery happened saying that HIV virus is the one which is responsible for causing AIDS. And for this discovery, Luc Montagnier and Francois Bard were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in the year 2008. When we look at the classification of this virus, it is a member of the genus Lentivirus and the family Retroviridae. So these lentiviruses have many morphologies and also certain biochemical properties that are in common. Okay, and these lentiviruses are transmitted as single-stranded positive sense enveloped RNA viruses. So among the HIV infection, it has been characterized into two types, that is HIV-1 and HIV-2. So this HIV-1 is the virus that was initially discovered, and it was initially known as lymphadenopathy associated virus, and also it was known as human T lymphotropic virus 3. This HIV-1 is more virulent and more infective when compared to that of HIV-2, and HIV-1 is the major cause of infections globally. Whatever HIV infections are happening, it is majorly because of HIV-1. Okay, and due to the relative poor capacity for transmission, HIV-2 is largely confined to specific region, that is West Africa. So when we look at the viral and antigenic structure of this virus, so it is a virus of 100 to 120 nanometer in diameter, and when the three-dimensional structure, when we see of this viral envelope, it appears like a sphere, and it is made from an assembly of 12 pentamers and 20 hexamers. So that is what it gives, a complete three-dimensional picture. So in this diagram, you see different structures that have been labeled. So we will start with the RNA part. From the inside of the viral virion structure to the outside, we'll see what are the different regions and what are the different structures and what are their functions. Okay, so we will first begin with the genomic material and the associated enzymes. So the genomic material in case of HIV is single-stranded RNA that are enclosed in a capsid. Okay, so single-stranded RNA, two single-stranded RNA strands are present, which are enclosed by a capsid, which are covered by a capsid, and the capsid is further covered by an envelope. And with the strands of RNA, enzymes that are associated is, the main enzyme is reverse transcriptase. So it is like a multifunctional enzyme that is capable of many functions, and that is the one factor which is also responsible for virulence in case of HIV. So these RNA, whatever is present, they are positive sense RNA, and they are tightly bound to the nucleocapsid proteins. So there are many other proteins that are present like P7 and enzymes like reverse transcriptase, proteases, ribonuclease, and also integrases. Okay, so we'll see in what are the functions in which, or what are the steps in which these enzymes are involved when we study the life cycle in the further slides. Okay, so this is about the genomic material. The next structure is the capsid. Okay, the capsid is the protein coat that encloses the genetic material, that is the RNA. It is conical in shape, and it is composed of the viral protein P24. Okay, so this capsid contains the protein P24. The next structure is the matrix. So matrix is composed of viral protein P17, and it surrounds the capsid. Okay, so the integrity of the virion particle is maintained because of this matrix. And further, the matrix is surrounded by the viral envelope, and it is composed of two layers of phospholipids. So the matrix is covered by the envelope, and the envelope is having two phospholipid layers, and these two phospholipid layers that are present in the viral envelope are made from the host cell, which originates at the time of budding of the virion from the cell of newly formed virus particles. Okay, so these viruses, once what in we'll study this in life cycle again in detail. I'm just giving you a just now. So what happens is, these lipid membranes are basically synthesized by utilizing the phospholipids of the host cell, and this is formed during the budding stage in the life cycle of this virion. Okay, so the next one is the envelope. What is this envelope? It encloses an icosahedral capsid. Okay, so the capsid is icosahedral in shape, and this capsid is covered by the envelope, and it possesses two identical macromolecules of RNA as genetic material. Okay, and the host cell proteins and about 70 copies of a complex HIV proteins are embedded in this viral envelope, and these proteins protrude through the surface of the virus particle, what you see as spikes. Okay, so what are these spikes? So the glycoprotein spikes is the next structure. These are spicules of glycoproteins, okay, and they are attached to the protein envelope. These spikes consist of a cap. The cap is made up of three molecules of glycoproteins, that is GP120, and a stem of three GP41 molecules. So GP120, whatever you're seeing here, that is the docking glycoprotein which is responsible for binding to the host cell. And the stem has three copies of this GP41 molecule. Okay. And the virus attaches to the host cell with this glycoprotein, that is GP120, and gets fused with the target cells to initiate the life cycle of this virus. Okay, so both of these surface proteins have been considered as targets for the future treatment and also for the development of vaccines against HIV. The difficult part or the challenging part is why vaccines are not being able to be developed is because these viruses undergo a lot of mutations, and they keep changing their structure, which becomes very difficult to synthesizing new proteins every time, so which becomes very difficult in finding out a vaccine and also for the treatment. So this is about the viral and antigenic structure. So I hope it's clear. So just to brief up, we have studied the genomic material. The genomic material comprises of two copies of RNA along with associated enzymes. The main enzyme is reverse transcriptase. The genomic material is further covered by the capsid, and the capsid is further covered by the matrix, and the matrix is again surrounded by the lipid membranes synthesized by the phospholipids utilized from the or taken up from the host cell, and these envelope or the lipid membrane is containing many spikes. So these are glycoprotein spikes which contain two main spikes, like two main components, that is GP120 and GP41. So this GP120 is the receptor for binding to the host cell. Okay. So next, when we look at the genome of this virus, uh, it consists of at least 7 structural landmarks, and also it contains 9 genes. Okay. So these 9 genes are very important, and it encodes about 19 proteins. Okay. So 3 of these 9 genes contain the information that is required to synthesize the structural proteins for the virus particle. So these 3 genes that are required for synthesizing structural proteins are ENV, which codes for a protein called GP160. Okay, this white colored whatever you see here is that ENV gene that codes for GP160, and after this gets lysed or after this is split up, it gives up the two glycoprotein spikes, that is GP120 and GP41. Okay, so the other genes that are involved are TAT, REB, NEF, WIF, and VPR and VPU. So all of these 6 genes, apart from the structural protein genes, are regulatory genes that are responsible for regulating the viral pathogenicity. Okay. So when we look at the pathogenicity or the life cycle of this virus, it has the basic steps as compared to that of other viral life cycles, but with certain modifications that are unique to this virus and that is unique to any other RNA viruses. The special thing is the presence of the enzyme reverse transcriptase as compared to any other RNA viruses. Okay. So if you see this schematic representation, you will see many steps that have been labeled. So we will go according to these steps to understand each step in detail. Okay. And the life cycle of this HIV virus consists of the following steps, which include entry, reverse transcript entry and fusion, then reverse transcription and integration, then transcription and translation, assembly, budding and maturation is the last step. Okay. So we will see each of these steps in detail. The first step is entry, attachment and fusion. Okay. Okay. So that all together attachment and fusion we can consider it as entry. Okay. So what happens? The virus binds to the host cell with its receptor, that is GP120 of the spikes. Okay. So the GP120 of the spike protein will bind to the CD4 receptor present on the host cells. Okay. So the CD4 receptors present on the T lymphocytes of the host cell acts as a host cell receptor that will bind to the that will be bound by the GP120 receptor of the HIV virus. Okay. So once it binds, so and the binding is also supported by other co-receptors that are present on the host cell surface, that is CCR5, CXCR4, CCR2 and CCR3. Okay. So with the help of these receptors and co-receptors, the binding or the attachment has happened. So the next thing is, after GP120, the GP41 of the spike protein comes into picture. So this GP41 protein is responsible for fusion of the virus particle to the host cell membrane. So once the fusion happens, the capsid becomes uncoated and it releases the genetic material along with certain proteins and enzymes into the host cell. Okay. So that is the second step, whatever you're seeing here. The particles, the enzyme, sorry, not the particles, the genetic material, the proteins and the enzymes that are required for completing the viral life cycle have been released into the host cell. Okay. So all these proteins, enzymes and the genetic material will form a complex in the host cell as once they enter, and this complex is known as pre-integration complex. Okay. Or it is also called as ribonucleoprotein complex. Okay. So ribonucleoprotein complex because it contains ribonucleic acid and also certain proteins. Pre-integration complex because it is a complex that is being formed in the host cell just before the genetic material of the virus fuses or integrates with that of the host cell DNA. Okay. So I'll tell you in the next step how the integration happens. So that is about the pre-integration complex that is being formed as soon as the virus enters the host cell. The genetic material of the virus enters the host cell. Okay. So this is the first step. In the second step, that is reverse transcription and integration. So reverse transcription is now the genetic material is in the form of RNA. Okay. So what happens? This RNA has to be first converted to DNA. So this happens by the enzyme reverse transcriptase. The RNA is the positive sense RNA is converted to cDNA, or it is reverse transcribed to cDNA with the help of the enzyme reverse transcriptase. Okay. So this DNA is now, cDNA is now single stranded, but the host cell DNA has two strands, or it is double stranded. So what the virus does is, with the help of DNA polymerase and other enzymes, it synthesizes the complementary strand of with to that of the cDNA to form a double stranded DNA. So that is what you're seeing here in yellow color. Okay, it is labeled as viral DNA along with integrase. Okay, so this double stranded DNA is now ready for integration with that of the host DNA. Okay, so this integration is catalyzed by the enzyme integrase. Okay, this is the main enzyme along with other proteins which include GAG matrix protein and accessory VPR protein. Okay, so with these proteins and the integrase, the viral DNA, double stranded DNA, integrates with that of the host DNA. Okay, so after integration, it leads to a series of enzymatic steps and integration has occurred. So this integrated DNA is now known as provirus. Okay, so this is the third and fourth step, whatever you're seeing here. So next we will move on to the next step, that is fifth step, wherein transcription and translation happens. So as I mentioned, this DNA is now called as provirus. The characteristic feature of this provirus is that it can remain dormant within the cell for a very long period of time. Okay, so that is when it is called as latency period, or the person would not, the infected individuals will not be showing any symptoms. So it can remain like this for many years. But when this cell becomes activated, when this uh, infected host cell gets activated, then it treats the HIV genes that have been integrated with the human genes as human genes itself. Okay, so it cannot distinguish between the viral genes and host genes. So it will treat the viral genes also as the host genes and starts to synthesize the proteins. So the first thing is it converts them, it is transcribed to mRNA, and it is then transported outside the nucleus. Okay, so once the mRNA are formed, or when the DNA is transcribed to mRNA, it is transported out of the nucleus to the cytoplasm, where translation will occur. Okay, so in the cytoplasm, the mRNA is translated to synthesize all viral structural proteins, the capsid proteins, whatever proteins that are required by the virion part for the synthesis, for the formation of a new virion particle, are synthesized. Okay, so the next last step is assembly, budding and maturation. So then the messenger RNA strands that are produced by the cell, which contain the genetic material, then gather together with newly made proteins and enzymes to form a new viral particle. Okay, so this newly formed viral particle are then released from the cell. So the enzyme protease plays a very important role at this stage of the HIV life cycle by uh, lysing up the long strands of protein into smaller pieces, so that are required to construct the mature viral core. Okay, so it is, the proteins are synthesized as a long strand, and then the proteases will cleave it to make it short stretches so that the viral core can be made, because we saw that it contains many hexamers and pentamers in the three-dimensional structure. So that's why proteases are playing the role in cleavage of the long strands of proteins. Then the newly matured viral particles are ready to infect another cell and begin the So looking at the pathogenesis of the HIV or in case of AIDS. So after here in pathogenesis, we will be seeing what happens, what are the host responses and how the host is affected and what are the responses of the host when the viral life cycle is going on in the host cell. Okay. So once the virus enters into the mucous membrane or skin through injection or through direct passage, the virus travels to the dendritic cells. So these dendritic cells are a type of macrophages that lie underneath the skin. Okay. So the virus multiplies in the macrophages of the skin, lymph organs, bone marrow, and also in the blood. Okay. It infects and destroys many of the cells that are designated to target the virus, like for example the CD4 cells. Okay, so whichever cells, the CD4 cells that are designated to destroy this virus particle, the virus targets such cells and destroys them. Okay, the receptor for the virus, as we have seen in the life cycle, it is the CD4, and the virus may infect any cell that bears this CD4 antigen on their surface. Okay, and specific binding of this CD4 is by the GP120 protein, as we have seen, and the fusion happens then by the GP41. So after fusion, just to brief up whatever we have studied there, along with some pathogenesis details, I will be saying in between. So after the fusion with the host cell membrane, the RNA is released, reverse transcribed to cDNA, then replicated to double-stranded DNA, then transcription, translation, and maturation of the genome particle. So this cycle keeps happening, and from time to time lytic infection is also initiated, releasing the progeny viruses which can infect other cells as well. So the newly synthesized viruses will start to infect the other cells. And as I mentioned, this long incubation period in case of this AIDS is because of its latency. So in an infected individual, the virus can be isolated from the blood, the lymphocytes, the bodily secretions like cervical secretions, saliva, tears, from plasma, urine. Okay, and such samples, any such samples can be used for the isolation of the virus. So looking at the mechanism of this pathogenesis, in case of HIV infection, the damage is caused to the CD4 T lymphocytes. Okay, so the T4 cells will start to decrease in number in the body in infected individuals, and also the T4 and T8, that is the helper cell and the helper cells to the suppressor cell ratio is also reversed. So the T4 cells will not release the required amount of interleukins, and this has a marked damping effect on the cell mediated immune response, and it will also affect the chemotaxis, antigen presentation, and intracellular killing by the macrophages are all destroyed. So all these functions have been blocked by the viral life cycle, and also it can result in delayed hypersensitivity in skin testing. It can result in lymphopenia, then loss of essential T4 memory cells and also the stem cells. The other conditions that have been seen are hypergamma globulinemia, so that is high levels of IgG and IgA. So because T lymphocytes have multiple cytotoxic function, their destruction will pave way or it will lead for invasion of other opportunistic agents and also other opportunistic infections including cancer. Okay, since these T4 lymphocytes are targeted, and since these are responsible for also for the stimulation of antibodies from the B cells, once this is blocked, all the cell-mediated immune response as well as humoral immune response are totally blocked, and this is a result which leads to all the other opportunistic infections. So it is like a sea of infections flooding in because of the loss of both cell-mediated and humoral immune responses. So that is what happens in the pathogenesis. So next, looking at the symptoms of this HIV infection, there are 5 main steps in the symptoms, like how the disease progresses, like from when it remains dormant, and what are the steps in which it proceeds. Okay, so the first step is acute HIV infection. First symptom, the initial symptoms. It is the it lasts for a very short period of time, and within few weeks of infection, the patients will start to experience fever, diarrhea, headache, rashes, then lymphadenopathy, night sweats, and also general fatigue or general tiredness. So, and these symptoms can last for a few weeks, and also it can continue for 6 months. Okay. Then the tests for HIV antibodies during this period are generally negative at the onset of the illness, but it starts to become positive during the course. Like, say, for example, by the end of 6 months, it can start giving positive results. That's why this phase or this phase is referred to as seroconversion illness. Okay, that is seroconversion illness refers to the changing of the results from negative to positive, or the presence of the virus in the bloodstream. So the next phase is the asymptomatic or the latent infection. So every individual who has been infected with this HIV, whether they undergo the seroconversion illness or not, they will pass through this symptomless phase of infection or latency period. So that this can vary from 2 to 15 years. Okay, as I mentioned in the life cycle, that the once the viral DNA has integrated with the host DNA, it can remain as such, and the cell will be infected, the T cell is infected. So this T cell can remain as such for many years. So that is what we are seeing here as asymptomatic or latent infection. The next step is persistent generalized lymphadenopathy. So what is this lymphadenopathy? It has been defined as the presence of enlarged lymph nodes, and this enlargement can be up to 1 centimeter in diameter in 2 or more sites, and this can persist for at least a period of 3 months. For 3 months. Okay. The next phase is referred to as AIDS related complex. This phase includes patients which they show considerable immunodeficiency, and they suffer from various opportunistic infections. Okay, the symptoms include fatigue, fever, diarrhea, then marked weight loss of the body, and common opportunistic infections during this phase include oral candidiasis, salmonellosis, and also tuberculosis. So once HIV infected patients reach this stage, it can lead to the fully blown AIDS stage, that is the next phase. So this is the next phase, that is the AIDS, which has like what to say, many symptoms, like all kinds of diseases can be seen during this phase, and this is the end stage of the disease, and it represents irreversible breakdown of immune defense mechanisms with many progressive opportunistic infections, and it can also lead to malignancy or cancer. Okay, so some of the bacterial diseases include persistent pneumonia, then tuberculosis, salmonellosis, septicemia, pelvic inflammatory disease. Then fungal infections can include pneumocystis carcini pneumonia, and cryptococcus caused by Cryptococcus neoformans, disseminated histoplasmosis caused by Histoplasma capsulatum, coccidiomycosis caused by Coccidioides immitis, candidiasis caused by Candida albicans, and many viral infections like cytomegaloviruses that produce pneumonia, and herpes simplex virus infections, and protozoan infections can include toxoplasmosis, cryptosporidium, diarrhea, and the it can also lead to malignancies, that is cancer due to the loss of natural killer cells. It can lead to Kaposis sarcoma caused by herpes virus, and many other cancers can be seen, that is carcinomas of the skin, mouth, and also rectum. So next, coming to the diagnosis, many tests are available, like based on the patient's the symptomatic phase, or in which phase the patient is suffering the infection from. There can be many tests that can be made. So these tests for HIV differ in their methodology and also the testing purpose. These tests are done for three reasons. For one is for individual diagnosis, the other is for protection of blood or tissue, and also for public health surveillance. So the serologic tests include HIV antibody assays by ELISA and Western blotting. So a basic ELISA test that will be detecting the antigen or antibody titer. Antigen or antibody titer is nothing but the amount of antigen that is present in the patient's sample. Then Western blotting is the confirmatory method, wherein it will be saying whether HIV antigen is present or not. And other rapid tests. So these currently marketed rapid tests are essential for they are essentially ELISAs that have been adopted for rapid turnaround time. So in case they have certain patients, like when they are going any company diagnosis, it is mandatory for them to undergo this HIV and HPSAG, that is hepatitis B test. So in such conditions, these rapid tests, that is card tests, are performed. They might not be facing any infections, but still they have to undergo this as an official procedure. So that's why such rapid tests are considered in such conditions. Then another test is HIV P24 antigen test. This P24 protein is a product of the GAG gene, and it is present in the viral core. So the availability of viral load testing, P24 is used for monitoring the disease activity. The other alternative samples that can be used for apart from blood are urine and saliva, and they also follow the same procedures like HIV, ELISA or Western blotting. So in the next set of tests, that is viral tests, the major application is using RNA assays. So RNA assays are used as a basis for these virological tests. So diagnosis of HIV in case of infants, what happens in infants and up to 18 months, placentally transferred HIV antibody from mother precludes antibody testing for diagnosis. So mother to child transmission can be possible. So that is about the diagnosis part. So next, coming to the epidemiology. So in epidemiology, we'll be seeing how the infection can spread. Like what are the conditions for the infection to spread. It can be transmitted from heterosexual partners of HIV carriers, and this is about 8% of the cases that contribute to the AIDS disease. And then homosexual males contribute about 50% of the cases in the US. And intravenous drug users contribute about 60%, and they can act as carriers. Then blood transfusion and organ transplant patients, they can also carry HIV. Then patients with coagulation disorders who receive replacement factors. So for such tests, generally the blood is tested and given, but in some conditions this can happen. That's why the testing for AIDS is very much necessary for any blood transfusion. And chances of HIV positive mother infecting the fetus is 1 in 3, so which is also very high. So prophylactic measures, many prophylactic measures, like people should be educated about AIDS, and every year December 1st is observed as World AIDS Day, and it is one of the methods to educate people about AIDS. And blood tests must be conducted in blood donors and donors of semen and other organs. Then disposable needles and syringes should be used. Then in physical contact, one should maintain one should be monogamous, and dentists should also use sterilized equipments because it can enter directly into the digestive system. Then one should also, especially in this generation, one should also take care of the tattoos, ear and nose piercing from unqualified people, because they might be using the same needles for many customers who come there. And also to avoid use of common blades in the saloons. So these are coming to the treatment. So far there is no cure for AIDS, and none of these therapies that are available can prolong the life, or they can stop the symptoms. The treatment for AIDS mainly focuses on the supportive care and drugs, especially to control all the opportunistic infections and also certain HIV infections. Okay. So here you will see a set of drugs that have been given for specific infections, like the fungal infection, like PCP. Pentamidine is given for cytomegaloviruses. Ganciclovir and foscarnet is given. And for fungal infections, antifungals like fluconazole is given. And for to target HIV enzymes, protease inhibitors are used to block the HIV enzyme, which is involved in the assembly and maturation of the virus. And combining 2 reverse transcriptase inhibitors and 1 protease inhibitor, the virus can be interrupted in different phases of their life cycle. So that is about the AIDS or HIV. And 1st December, as we studied before, it is observed as World AIDS Day to educate people and to make them aware of the consequences of this deadly disease. Thank you. Learn, and you should also educate people whatever you have learned. If you have any doubts, you can post it in the course chat. Thank you.